They had spent the past week in paradise. After a breathtaking honeymoon filled with ocean views, quiet dinners, and unforgettable moments, Joo-Won and Mee-Mee welcomed the new year together beneath the Maldivian sky. Now it was time to leave. The room was quiet, peaceful, the kind of peaceful that only came after a dream had finally come true. Open suitcases rested across the bedroom floor. Clothes were neatly folded as the reality of leaving paradise slowly settled in. Mee-Mee carefully folded one of Joo-Won's shirts before placing it inside his suitcase. Joo-Won zipped his luggage halfway, then paused. He looked over at his wife for a long moment before asking softly, "Did you enjoy yourself?" Mee-Mee looked up at him as though he'd just asked the silliest question imaginable. "Enjoy myself," she laughed. "Where do I even start?" She began counting on her fingers. Dinner 6 meters beneath the ocean. Surrounded by fish that looked like they paid more for their fits than I did. And whoever invented floating breakfasts in a private pool deserves a raise. For real. She smiled, remembering every second. Before she could continue, Joo-Won couldn't help himself. "Hold on," he laughed. "You're forgetting the whale sharks." Mee-Mee finger clapped, period. They both laughed. Then his smile softened. He slowly walked toward her. "So, Mrs. Park." He stopped only inches away. "Which activity was your favorite?" Mee-Mee didn't answer right away. Instead, that familiar mischievous smile slowly spread across her face. She stepped closer until there wasn't an inch of space between them. Then she slipped her arms around his neck and looked into his eyes. None of those. Joo-Won raised an eyebrow. She gently shook her head. "My favorite?" She leaned in just enough for only him to hear. "Was the one I waited all year for." Joo-Won did that tiny smile he always wore whenever he was trying not to get too emotional. Mee-Mee smiled. Then, softly, she began singing to her husband. "Now that we're married."
I kept my hands polite, kept my mouth in line, kept that hunger folded up for a very long time. I walked that edge for years, with a steady face. Now I wear your name, and I got no room to take. No more stopping short, no more holding back. You gave me the green light, and I'm right where you at. Your smile says go on, and your touch says stay. I've been saved for this, now I got my way. Now that we're married, I can love you free. Now that we're married, you can get all of me. Yeah. Kiss me like you mean it, pull me close and deep. Now that we're married, my hands can finally speak.
As the final note lingered in the air, Mee-Mee stopped singing, not because the song was over, but because Joo-Won had gently pulled her into his arms and was kissing her. Slowly, tenderly. He whispered, "Oh, the mic was on, Mrs. Park." She smiled against his lips before wrapping her arms even tighter around his neck. Within seconds, the kiss deepened. Mee-Mee found herself backed gently against the wall, laughing softly between kisses. Joo-Won gently slipped off his robe. Then knock. Knock. Neither of them moved. Another knock. Still nothing. The door slowly opened. "Bruno." Again he froze. "Ah." His eyes immediately darted toward the ceiling. "I can see you're busy." Mee-Mee's eyes grew wide. She laughed in disbelief. "Didn't we ask you to please knock first?" Bruno looked genuinely confused. "I did knock." He glanced at his watch. "Twice. The car is waiting. We can't be late." Joo-Won sighed without letting go of his wife. "Bruno, there is a lady in the room." "Oh." Bruno immediately turned around. "My apologies." He respectfully faced the opposite direction while somehow still standing in the middle of the room. Mee-Mee blinked, then looked at Joo-Won. "He is exactly like Ingrid." Joo-Won couldn't help but chuckle. Silence. Bruno remained exactly where he was staring at his watch, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. Finally, Joo-Won laughed. "Bruno, bro, just give us 1 minute." Bruno nodded. "Of course." He never turned around. He simply kept looking at his watch. Mee-Mee sighed dramatically. I hate to be like this, but Bruno, can you go outside? Joo-Won could not help but to laugh. Bruno said, oh, realizing the state they were in, or rather the state they were trying to be in. So he immediately walked out and quietly closed the door. 30 minutes later, Bruno was still standing outside the bungalow. He adjusted his tie, checked his watch, sighed, checked it again. From behind the closed door, Joo-Won's voice finally echoed. Take 5, my guy. We'll just catch the next flight. Bruno closed his eyes. Understood. Many moments later, a luxury SUV glided toward the private airport. Once inside first class, Mee-Mee rested comfortably against Joo-Won's shoulder as he gently cupped her face. Outside the window, the turquoise waters of the Maldives slowly disappeared beneath the clouds. Their honeymoon was over, but their next chapter was waiting for them in Seoul. For Joo-Won, Seoul wasn't just another destination. It was home. Before Kairos-Five's world tour officially kicked off, rehearsals, interviews, wardrobe fittings, and endless meetings filled the calendar. But the break also gave Joo-Won something he hadn't enjoyed in far too long: time with his family. As the plane touched down, Seoul's familiar skyline came into view. Glass towers stretched toward the clouds while the Han River shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, fast, modern, alive. They could have stayed at one of Seoul's finest hotels. His parents wouldn't hear of it. Mrs. Park made it perfectly clear that if they stayed anywhere other than her apartment, she would take it as a personal insult. Joo-Won wisely chose life. So, the newlyweds settled into his parents' elegant apartment inside one of Seoul's exclusive retirement high-rises, where breathtaking city views came standard, and homemade meals were mandatory. Before long, Mee-Mee found herself exactly where Mrs. Park wanted her. The kitchen. The two women spent hours swapping recipes, laughing over stories from Joo-Won's childhood, and discussing whether fermented kimchi or vinegar collard greens deserved family bragging rights. Every now and then, Joo-Won wandered in planning to steal a bite. Every time his mother shooed him right back out. Are you cooking tonight? No. Then stop sampling dinner. Mee-Mee laughed as Joo-Won reluctantly accepted defeat. Whenever they weren't at the apartment, Joo-Won introduced his wife to the Seoul he loved. Hidden cafes tucked between centuries-old alleyways, restaurants overlooking the Han River, designer shopping districts, late-night walks beneath glowing city lights. Each place held another memory, another story, another piece of the life he'd always hoped to share with the woman he loved. One evening, as they returned home, Joo-Won smiled. MinJae and Dina are in town, too. Mee-Mee looked up. They are. They're staying at the compound. Mee-Mee laughed softly. The compound. Joo-Won nodded. It's in one of the ultra-wealthy neighborhoods near Itaewon-ro. The homes there aren't really houses. He smiled. They're custom-built gated estates surrounded by high walls, private security, and just enough cameras to make Bruno happy. Mee-Mee nodded. That definitely sounds like MinJae. She smiled. Then she grabbed Joo-Won's hand. I'm still not over finding out the sweetest guy in Kairos-5 can fight like that. Joo-Won chuckled. Neither are most people. Mee-Mee looked over. I mean, you had me thinking you were a pop star. A beat. Then one kidnapping later. She pointed at him. I discovered I married K-pop Batman. Joo-Won laughed. That nickname is never going away, is it? Mee-Mee grinned. Not a chance. And now you're telling me Batman's friend lives in a mansion with security walls. Joo-Won smiled, pretty much. The compound came long before Dina. It was one of the few places he could actually disappear. Mee-Mee smiled. Maeve said MinJae was in his feels as soon as he met Dina. He was making a pretty penny but left crime for her. Joo-Won kissed her on the cheek. That's what love will do. Hey, loves. If you're wondering how Joo-Won ended up with black belt skills, yes, there's an episode for that. He actually used them to help rescue Mel after she was kidnapped. As they say, it's a long, juicy story. And of course, MinJae and Prince Soren were ready for all the smoke. If you'd like to catch up, we've linked that episode below, along with Mee-Mee and Joo-Won's full love story, plus the complete Christmas holiday Heartthrobs playlist featuring all of our couples. But we digress. Let's get back to the newlyweds. Across Seoul, behind those aforementioned towering walls of MinJae's estate in the prestigious Itaewon-ro district, MinJae and Dina were doing anything but relaxing. Inside the compound's private gym, the married couple sparred with practiced precision. Punch, block, kick, counter. Dina managed another combination before lowering her gloves. She looked more tired than usual. MinJae noticed immediately. He always did. You okay? I'm fine. You slowed down. I said I'm fine. He studied her for another second. She rolled her eyes. Stop analyzing me. I'm observing. That's somehow worse. She smiled despite herself. He smiled back. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Without another word, MinJae stepped forward. She reached for the front of his training shirt, pulling him the last few inches between them. Their lips met, not briefly, completely. Kiss deepened almost immediately, equal parts affection and familiarity, as though this interruption to training had become its own routine. A few unsteady steps later, Dina's back met one of the padded weight machines. MinJae's hands settled gently at her waist as she laughed softly against his lips before kissing him again. Neither one seemed concerned that they were smooching in the middle of their own gym, with an audience. Several feet away, bodyguards Joo-Hoon and Seo-Hyun sighed and exchanged a knowing glance. Without saying a word, both men simultaneously covered their eyes. Standard protocol. A moment later, the gym door opened. Kyono, MinJae's closest assistant, walked inside carrying a tablet. "Sir, I just needed your signatu." He froze, saw exactly what was happening. "Right." He calmly turned around. "I'll come back." The door clicked shut. Unlike Bruno, Kyono knew the drill. That evening, everyone gathered at Joo-Won's uncle's upscale restaurant. The warm welcome felt less like a business dinner and more like family. His uncle greeted each guest personally before insisting everyone order far more food than any table actually needed. MinJae had invited Dylan to dinner while he was visiting from New York. Business came first. The two men discussed several investments, including plans surrounding his data center project in Petersburg, Virginia. Then Dylan casually added, "My newest racehorse ships to Grant's ranch in Petersburg in a few days." Joo-Won looked over. "Another one?" Dylan nodded. "The best one." He took another sip of his drink. "That thoroughbred cost 40. Mee-Mee's eyebrows lifted. 40,000. Dylan looked at her. "Mrs. Park, a beat. Try 40 million. Mee-Mee's eyes became as wide as saucers. "Million," Joo-Won chuckled across the table. Even MinJae laughed, a genuine one, which didn't happen nearly often enough. Mee-Mee looked back and forth between them. "You spent $40 million on a horse?" Dylan shrugged as if she'd asked why he'd ordered dessert. "He's very fast." The table erupted in laughter. Completely unfazed, Dylan took another sip of his drink. "Be in Petersburg next week to check on him." No one missed how carefully he chose his words. Just then Mee-Mee's phone buzzed. It was Jenny. She answered immediately on FaceTime. Jenny's smiling face filled the screen. "Hey, best friend, I wasn't sure if this was a good time to call, but then I thought, who cares, I need to see my boo." Mee-Mee laughed. "We're all at dinner." Jenny's eyes widened. "Who's all there?" Mee-Mee flipped the phone around the table. Joo-Won flashed a casual peace sign. Dina smiled and waved. MinJae gave a polite nod. Then the camera landed on Dylan. He tipped his cowboy hat with an easy grin. "Good evening, pretty girl." The table burst into laughter. Mee-Mee turned the phone back toward herself, shaking her head. Jenny blinked. "Girl," another beat. "Now hold on, that's the fine man from the wedding reception. God took his time with that one." More laughter. Mee-Mee nodded. "That's Dylan. We're talking about how he spent $40 million on a racehorse." Jenny put both hands on her hips. "Does the horse cook breakfast?" The entire table laughed. She wasn't finished, because for $40 million, that horse better scramble eggs, fold laundry, and remind me to take my vitamins. Even MinJae chuckled. Joo-Won had completely lost it now, laughing so hard he had to lean forward, one hand squeezing Mee-Mee's thigh beneath the table. Dylan looked genuinely entertained. A slow grin spread across his face. "You know," he said. "I like her." Jenny pointed at the phone. "Well, I like me too." The laughter somehow got even louder. Mee-Mee covered her face. "Jenny, I'll call you later before you embarrass me." "Girl, you knew who was calling you. You saw that caller ID," Mee-Mee cackled. Then Jenny said, "I gotta go anyways. Looking at that Dylan guy is overstimulating me." Everyone roared with laughter. Mee-Mee smooched, "Bye boo," as she clicked off the call. Then Dylan quietly looked at Mee-Mee and said, "She's funny." Joo-Won kissed her on the cheek. "They both are. That's why those two get along so well." Mee-Mee smiled knowingly. "That's my best friend." As conversations continued around the table, Mee-Mee quietly noticed Dina barely touching her food. "You don't like it." "I do. You've eaten 3 bites. I'm just not very hungry." A few minutes later, Dina reached for her water, paused, then gently pressed the back of her hand against her forehead. "You okay?" "I'm fine." MinJae looked over immediately. "You're warm." "I'm not." "You are." "You are not a doctor." "I know. You're doing a lot right now, so I've been told." Everyone chuckled, but MinJae didn't. His eyes never left her. By dessert, Dina's smile had faded. MinJae stood up. We're leaving. Dina looked up at him. Mins, I'm carrying you out of here. I can walk. Before MinJae could retort, Mee-Mee gently stepped in. I'll go with her. MinJae looked at her. I'll come. Mee-Mee smiled. No, you won't. A pause. MinJae blinked. His two bodyguards, Joo-Hoon and Seo-Jun, jutted their heads back. No one ever told MinJae what to do. He tilted his head towards Mee-Mee and asked, Why? Mee-Mee pointed toward Dina. Because she's going to drink tea, eat soup, and sleep. You have business to finish. I got this. MinJae looked back at his wife. Then at Mee-Mee. He still wasn't convinced, not even a little. Mee-Mee stared at him for a moment, then she laughed. Oh my goodness, she turned toward Dina. Your sweetie is a Velcro husband. The table went quiet. MinJae frowned. What? Joo-Won immediately laughed. Of course he understood. A husband who sticks to his wife. MinJae considered this carefully. He looked at Dina, then back at Joo-Won. Is that bad? Dina's expression softened. She reached for his hand. No. She smiled. It's actually one of my favorite things about you. For a moment, nobody teased him because everyone at the table understood. MinJae didn't keep Dina close to the vest because he thought she was incapable. He followed her because besides making sure she was okay, being near her was where he felt most at home. And honestly, nobody could argue with that, especially not his wife. But MinJae eventually acquiesced. After all, he and Dylan had only scratched the surface of the business they needed to discuss. And he was looking forward to spending a little more time catching up with Joo-Won. As Mee-Mee and Dina headed toward the door, Mee-Mee paused. She leaned up, kissed Joo-Won softly, and whispered in his ear, I'll be at the folks soon. Joo-Won smiled and gave a small nod. Then, reluctantly, he let his wife go. A short while later, Mee-Mee found herself standing inside one of the most breathtaking homes she'd ever seen. Every room somehow looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. She turned in a slow circle. This place is unbelievable. Dina laughed tiredly. It loses its sparkle after a while. Mee-Mee wasn't convinced. As Dina settled onto the sofa, a massive Maine Coon cat slowly appeared around the corner. Bond! Usually affectionate, usually calm. Tonight, he planted himself directly beside Dina. His bright eyes locked onto Mee-Mee. A low hiss escaped his throat. Mee-Mee blinked. I don't think he likes me. Dina frowned. That's strange. She reached down to pet him. He's never like this. Bond refused to move. I'm probably taking him to the vet when we get back to Petersburg. Mee-Mee smiled. Maybe he's just having an off day. It'd be like that. Wild Dina chuckled a little bit but quickly drifted off to sleep. Mee-Mee quietly searched the kitchen cabinets. The staff were either gone for the day or in their bedrooms. Mee-Mee could figure it out. She found tea, fresh ginger, garlic, scallions, and chicken broth. Perfect. Soon a warm pot of homemade soup simmered on the stove while tea steeped nearby. When she returned, Dina was awake again. Mee-Mee gently placed a cool cloth across Dina's forehead. You know, Mee-Mee smiled softly. You've been warm since dinner, Dina sighed. It's probably jet lag. Maybe. But Mee-Mee wasn't entirely convinced. Later that week, the park apartment had become a second home for Mee-Mee. Between shared meals, long conversations, and quiet moments with Joo-Won's parents, she was beginning to understand where so much of her husband came from. His discipline, his kindness, his devotion. And apparently something else. Mrs. Park was in the kitchen preparing tea while Mee-Mee stepped into the other room to grab something she had left behind. A few moments later, she turned around and stopped. Joo-Won was standing right behind her. She blinked. Juju. Yes, baby, did you need something? He looked around. No. A pause. Mee-Mee tilted her head, then stared at him, and slowly, a smile appeared. Oh my goodness. Mee-Mee crossed her arms. You're a Velcro husband too. Joo-Won looked genuinely confused. I'm not. Mee-Mee couldn't help but smile. The irony wasn't lost on her. This extraordinarily handsome man, arguably the biggest pop star in the world, had somehow become her very own Velcro husband. From the kitchen, Mrs. Park smiled to herself. Apparently she'd heard every word. Oh, she casually invited herself into the conversation. He has always been like that. Joo-Won froze. He pleaded mommy in Korean, but Mrs. Park ignored him. She walked in carrying 2 cups of tea, smiling. When he was little, if I left the room, she looked at Mee-Mee. He followed me everywhere. Mee-Mee immediately started laughing. Joo-Won shook his head. That's not true. Mrs. Park smiled. It is very true. She handed Mee-Mee her tea. He would insist he was not following me. She paused. He was simply going where I was going. Mee-Mee laughed even harder. Joo-Won looked completely betrayed. Mrs. Park laughed softly. And Joo-Won, despite his best efforts, couldn't help but smile, because maybe his mom was right. Maybe he had always been this way. He had always known where he wanted to be, and it was wherever the people he loved were. The next morning, it was back to business. Inside the conference room, the energy had completely shifted. No family dinners, no sightseeing, no honeymoon conversations, just schedules, deadlines. And one very frustrated Ji-sun. Joo-Won sat beside his bandmates as they reviewed the final preparations for the upcoming world tour. Take him, Seo-Jun, Dae-Hyun, and Min-Kyu, less than a handful of days. That was all they had before Kairos-5 officially kicked off their tour in New York City. Outside, the world was already preparing. Fans had gathered outside the building wishing for a glimpse of the group. Security teams moved through the crowd, led by Bruno and the protection team. Signs, gifts, letters, fan projects. The dedication was endless. One fan group had even delivered 100 toddler snacks and juice boxes for Min-Kyu because it seemed that everyone had seen the photos of him eating his child's snacks at a meeting. Bruno stared at the delivery. 100, the staff member nodded. They wanted to make sure he had enough. Inside the conference room, Ji-sun scrolled through her tablet. I still haven't found an assistant. Everyone immediately knew she was annoyed. I've interviewed 12 people. She shook her head. Min-Kyu looked impressed. That's a lot. It should not be this difficult to find someone competent. She continued scrolling. They don't organize properly. They don't anticipate needs. They don't understand the schedule. A pause. One person asked me what a tour manager does. The room went silent. Ji-sun sighed. And none of them are as good as the last one. Dae-Hyun looked up. The rat. Ji-sun immediately turned toward him. A beat. That is not her name. Dae-Hyun blinked. You thought wrong. She looked around the table. We all make mistakes. Then she looked directly at him. You should know that. Everyone laughed, even Ji-sun smiled. Then she returned to her tablet. Also, the room quieted. Katrina did another interview yesterday. Joo-Won covered his face. The guys exchanged looks. Ji-sun shook her head. She was promoting her new project. Everyone immediately shook their heads, but Ji-sun continued. Interviewer didn't stay on topic. She looked up. They brought up the accusations, and she was not prepared. A small, satisfied silence passed through the room, not because they enjoyed seeing anyone embarrassed, but because the truth was finally becoming harder to avoid. Ji-sun continued. Our attorney's advice remains the same. She closed the tablet. We do not mention her. Everyone nodded. The less attention Katrina received, the better. Ji-sun tapped the schedule. Now, she brought up the tour plans. The tour begins in 1 week in New York. The mood shifted. Kairos-5 has a few days to finalize Seo-Jun's new choreography from Los Angeles and learn the new song arrangements. She looked toward Seo-Jun. Everything ready? Seo-Jun nodded. Ji-sun studied him. Good. A pause, because I don't have time to babysit dancers. Dae-Hyun whispered. She means us. More laughter. Ji-sun gathered her tablet and stood. One more thing. Everyone looked up. No calls to the wives, girlfriends, she paused. Or in Dae-Hyun's case, South Korea. The room erupted in laughter. Dae-Hyun looked offended. Ji-sun simply shook her head. You all need to focus. She pointed toward the schedule. You can see them when you go home. And with that, she walked out of the room, already mumbling something about her next assistant interview. Probably another disaster. Then, Seo-Jun's phone buzzed. Everyone glanced over. His expression changed, only slightly, but enough. It was Adrienne. He stepped away from the table. Excuse me, he answered. Hey. Adrienne appeared on screen from the dance studio. Within seconds, they were discussing choreography, music counts, transitions, movements, timing, very professional, very focused, very, not suspicious at all. When Seo-Jun returned, everyone looked at him. He paused. It's about choreography. The entire room just stared at him. Much later in the Kairos-5 practice studio, the grueling rehearsal continued for hours. The music shook the room. The choreography pushed everyone to their limits. During a break, Seo-Jun's phone buzzed again. Adrienne again, he answered, again. Nobody said anything. They just watched. After the call ended, Seo-Jun looked around. It's about choreography. While Joo-Won was caught up in the chaos of final rehearsals, Mee-Mee was at the compound saying goodbye. Madinah and MinJae were preparing for their return to Petersburg. And somewhere between the tea, the soup, and late-night conversations, Mee-Mee realized something. She was going to miss her. Not because they had known each other for years. They hadn't. Truthfully, they were very different. Mee-Mee had always been the type to be outside. Dinah, Unless she was fighting the ops or solving a crime, she was perfectly content behind a book, inside her home, with Bond nearby. If it wasn't for Brianna and Grant's invitation to the couple's retreat, their paths probably never would have crossed. But sometimes a person enters your life at exactly the right moment. Mee-Mee hugged Dina tightly. "Call me when you get home." Dina smiled. "I will." Then Mee-Mee glanced toward MinJae, who was standing nearby watching his wife like she was the only person in the room. Mee-Mee observed this and smiled at Dina. "Guess what? My Juju is a Velcro husband, too." Dina laughed. MinJae still didn't understand the phrase, but honestly, he was starting to think it sounded like a compliment. Before they left, Dina thanked Mee-Mee for everything: the tea, the soup, the kindness, the way she stepped in without being asked. Mee-Mee shrugged. "That's what neighbors do." Then she gently reminded her, "Love your neighbor as yourself, Luke 10:27. Dina smiled because she understood. Some friendships are built through years, others are built through moments. As the private jet lifted into the sky, Dina rested comfortably against MinJae. The usually unstoppable woman was finally allowing herself to rest. He adjusted the blanket around her. She looked at him and said in Korean, "You know I'm okay, right?" "Yes, but I'm still going to worry." She smiled, and honestly, she wouldn't have it any other way. Mee-Mee returned to Atlanta. First stop was Keisha's to get her braids back in, and Joo-Won's New York concert was still 2 days away, which gave her just enough time to help Jenny. The online clothing company they had built together was growing faster than anyone imagined. Orders continued pouring in. New partnerships were forming, and Jenny couldn't have been happier to have her business partner back. One person, however, was making sure neither of them got too comfortable: Ingrid. From all the way in Avaleria, she checked in several times a day through video calls. After all, Princess Mel had personally asked her to help guide their growing business. By the 8th meeting, Mee-Mee threw both hands on her hips. "I've been back less than 24 hours. Jenny groaned. "I love Miss Ingrid, but does she ever sleep?" The two women decided to call Mel. Unfortunately, they had completely forgotten the time difference. The screen lit up. A very sleepy Princess Mel answered, eyes barely open. Mee-Mee immediately covered her mouth. "Oops, I should know better. Sorry, cuz." Jenny added in with an awkward smile. "We forgot what time it was." She pointed dramatically toward the screen. "Your girl is trippin'." Mee-Mee nodded. For real, we've had 8 meetings already." Mel tried not to laugh. "I did ask her to help y'all." Mee-Mee smiled. "And we're grateful, but..." Mel interrupted with a grin. "I have a feeling Ingrid may have other things keeping her occupied pretty soon." Jenny's eyebrows shot up. "Ooh, Miss Ingrid got a man." Mee-Mee burst into laughter. "Not Miss Ingrid. I would absolutely love that for her." Mel finally lost the battle and laughed out loud. Beside her, Prince Soren stirred. He shifted slightly beneath the blankets. Mee-Mee immediately lowered her voice. "Okay, before I wake your husband, we'll let you go. Love you." Jenny made a heart with her fingers. The call ended. Mel smiled and settled back against Soren. For exactly 3 seconds, then. His eyes opened, completely awake. He said, "Our Ingrid has a man." Mel laughed so hard she buried her face in his shoulder. "You two go back to sleep, cutie." Soren smiled, pulled her on top of him. "Well, you've already woken me up." As the royal couple began their morning a little earlier than expected, halfway across the world, Kairos-5 was arriving in New York and about to put the finishing touches on a comeback the fans would never forget. The tour kickoff was finally here. The city was buzzing, and Kairos-5 had arrived to their NYC hotel. The fans were waiting outside even though it was close to midnight. The excitement was everywhere, but one person seemed unusually focused on his phone. Seo-Jun. He told the guys he needed extra time to perfect his dance solo. He was waiting for a call. Tae-Kim said, "You better get some rest." Seo-Jun told the guys he needed extra time to perfect his dance solo. Nobody questioned that because Seo-Jun had always been serious about his craft, until the hotel lobby doors opened, and Adrienne walked in the hotel lobby. She had flown in just that evening. The members noticed Seo-Jun's expression immediately. The look, the smile, the sudden change in Seo-Jun's entire energy. They had seen this before. They had seen it with Min Kyu. They had seen it with Tae-Kim, and they had especially saw it with Joo-Won. They knew. Everyone knew. Adrienne walked over. Even if Seo-Jun didn't fully know yet. "Ready?" Adrienne smiled. Seo-Jun asked, "For rehearsal." She tilted her head. "Obviously." Then she grinned. "Come on, K-pop." And just like that, Seo-Jun pulled his hoodie over his head, put on sunglasses, and followed her out of a side entrance for the hotel. The guys laughed. "K-pop, is that what she calls him?" About a half an hour later, the city outside was asleep. but the music inside was alive. Adrienne brought Seo-Jun to a friend's private dance studio so she could help him rehearse away from the attention of the tour. It was also to get a little one-on-one time, even though no one had admitted it out loud yet. No cameras, no fans, no pressure, just two dancers. For hours, they worked through choreography until it was wee early in the morning. Counts, transitions, and movements. Until finally Seo-Jun stopped the music. Adrienne looked over. "What?" He smiled slightly. "I have a question." She crossed her arms. "That usually means something complicated." He laughed, then he became serious. "Tomorrow night," a pause. "The concert," Adrienne nodded. "I want you to be my special guest," she blinked. "Your special guest?" Seo-Jun nodded. "On stage." For a moment, Adrienne just stared at him. "Seo-Jun," she started, but he cut her off. "I know what people will say." A small smile. "They'll wonder who you are." She looked away. "I'm not famous, and I know how K-pop stans can be. They dragged Mee-Mee at first, I don't know." He stepped a little closer. "That's not why I'm asking, and honestly, it's not about being famous. I love my fans, but this isn't for them. I'm asking because you're incredible." He had seen it. The passion, the discipline, the way she moved, the way she challenged him. "The audience deserves to see what I see every time we dance." Adrienne's eyes met his. Seo-Jun smiled. "I want you beside me." "Beside you?" Adrienne smiled. Seo-Jun smiled. "As part of my solo." For the first time, she wouldn't be simply helping Seo-Jun prepare for his performance. He was inviting her to do it with him. Adrienne looked at him for a moment, then she smiled. "The guy's cool with this," Seo-Jun answered without hesitation. "I'm not worried about them, it's Ji-sun." Adrienne laughed. "Mee-Mee told me about her." She shook her head. "She does not play." Seo-Jun laughed. "At all." Then his expression softened. "But don't worry about it." For a moment, neither of them said anything. Adrienne slowly reached for his hand, their fingers intertwined. She looked up at him. "Okay, I'll do it." Seo-Jun smiled. "Great. Under one condition." He blinked. "What's that?" Adrienne grinned. "We got a match." Seo-Jun stared. "What?" "You heard me." She shrugged. "I want to match your fly." For a split second, he simply looked at her. Then whatever restraint he'd been holding onto completely disappeared. He laughed, stepped forward, scooped her effortlessly into his arms, and kissed her, not cautiously, not awkwardly, like someone who had finally stopped talking himself out of what his heart had wanted all along. When they finally came up for air, both of them were smiling. Seo-Jun said, "You know, our stylists already picked all my stage looks." Adrienne nodded. "I figured." "But," he smiled, "I'll see what they can do." She grinned. "Good. If I'm about to dance in front of thousands of Kairos-5 fans." She pointed between them. "We better look right." Seo-Jun chuckled. "Fair enough." Then he took a small step backward. "But first," he reached for the music. "Let's make sure we dance right." And that is exactly what they did. That next night, it was time for the concert that the city had been waiting for. The arena glowed beneath thousands of lights, luxury suites, designer fits, cameras flashing, fans filling every seat, fans standing in front of the stage. The energy was impossible to describe, because this wasn't just a show. It was a comeback moment. Backstage, Mee-Mee stood beside Maeve, Tae-Kim's wife, who was carrying the calm confidence of someone who had lived in this lifestyle long before Mee-Mee ever stepped inside it. Mee-Mee smiled. "Where's Yoon?" Maeve laughed. "He's with Harin, Tae's younger sis." Mee-Mee nodded. "Okay, good, because I was about to say there is no way you brought a toddler into this chaos." Maeve smiled. "Right, besides this mama," she pointed to herself, "needed a break." They both laughed. And then another familiar face joined them. Minkyu's wife, Bora, with her pastel blue hair matching her hubby's playful energy perfectly. Within minutes, the three women found themselves laughing together. Different backgrounds, different lives, but one thing in common. They knew what it meant to love a man who belonged to the world but still came home to them. When the lights finally went down, the screaming started. The music exploded and Kairos-5 appeared. Tae, Joo-Won, Seo-Jun, Dae-Hyun, and Minkyu. 5 members, 1 heartbeat. The guys were in designer head to toe. The crowd went insane. Mee-Mee froze, not because she didn't expect fans. After all, Joo-Won had brought her on stage during his solo concert on New Year's a little over a year ago. She knew Joo-Won was loved. But seeing it at this level, especially as his wife, was different. Thousands of people calling his name, holding signs, crying, singing every word. She looked toward Maeve. Maeve simply smiled. "Welcome to our world." Mee-Mee nodded, then screamed, "My juju is fine stuff." Maeve and Bora laughed. The performances were everything fans had been waiting for. The vocals, the sharp choreography, the stage presence, the confidence. And for the first time, Mee-Mee understood this wasn't just fame. It was connection. During one of the songs, Joo-Won looked toward the side of the stage at her. For just a second, the superstar disappeared and he was simply her husband. He did a tiny wink, then immediately returned to the performance. Mee-Mee smiled because somehow that made her love him even more. Then the music changed. This song was new to the crowd. It was their solo song, Kairos-5, and every member did a solo dance as they were named.
Kairos-5, I got Kairos-5. Me sliding clean, go down grand, me machine. Joo-Won got the flow bent low, one look hit, then the whole room knows. June cut short, too smooth, too cold. Min-Kyu flips that post, then he let it roll. Dae-Hyun in the back, then he take that lead. Kairos-5, yeah, we run that.
Thousands of light sticks moved in perfect rhythm as Kairos-5 finished another explosive number, with Dae-Hyun doing his signature body roll, of course, to cuffing season. It was time for Seo-Jun's special solo. The stylists changed him into a black leather ensemble. The lights dimmed. He stepped into the spotlight. Calm, confident, completely in command. The audience erupted. He smiled. "I have someone I want you to meet." The fans screamed before they even knew why. A single spotlight appeared at the opposite end of the stage, and through the haze, Adrienne stepped out in a dazzling leather bikini top and a mini skirt paired with moon boots that shimmered beneath the lights. Seo-Jun's eyes nearly popped out of his head. She leaned close just long enough to whisper, "Your stylist said this was the only option." She gave him the tiniest wink, then said, "I match your fly." His laugh escaped before he could stop it. The audience looked completely confused. Who was she? Why was she here? Then the beat dropped and everything made sense. Seo-Jun and Adrienne hiked the crowd up first. Adrienne did a split and he backflipped. The freestyle dance unfolded like a conversation. Every move challenged the next. Every freestyle was answered. Years of training met effortless chemistry. By the end, the arena had completely lost its mind. Backstage, Mee-Mee stared at the monitor in absolute disbelief. She slowly turned toward Maeve. "She never told me she was performing." Maeve laughed. Well, the whole world knows now. On the screen, Adrienne spun into Seo-Jun's arms before effortlessly dancing away again. Mee-Mee smiled. "Oh, is she dancing on him like I dance on my juju?" Maeve burst into laughter. True, but with Olympic-level acrobatics. Bora, a former K-pop star herself, laughed so hard she nearly doubled over. Elsewhere, thousands of phones were already in the air. Videos were uploading before the song had even ended. Searches were multiplying by the second. Searches exploded. Who is the dancer with Seo-Jun? Are they a couple? Within minutes, the internet was trying to learn everything about the woman who had just stolen the spotlight. Backstage, the rest of Kairos-5 watched. Dae-Hyun looked toward Joo-Won. "Here we go again." Joo-Won laughed. Tae-Kim smiled. Even Min-Kyu couldn't hide his grin. Dae-Hyun said, "Do you think Seo-Jun even knows?" He couldn't bring himself to finish. But Min-Kyu did. "That he's falling in love." Silence. Tae-Kim smiled. "He doesn't, but he will." On stage, Seo-Jun and Adrienne never took their eyes off each other. They weren't trying to convince anyone. They weren't making a statement. They were simply doing what they loved. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself with words. Sometimes it looks like perfect timing, perfect trust, and one unforgettable dance. Seo-Jun didn't realize it yet, but he just found his person, and everyone watched it happen. Hours later, the lights of New York sparkled outside Joo-Won and Mee-Mee's Manhattan hotel window. The same city that had watched Kairos-5 return to the stage now disappeared behind closed doors. No fans, no cameras, no managers, just them. Mee-Mee stood near the window, still taking everything in. "Your life is really something." Joo-Won smiled. "Life," she turned toward him. "Yes, the screaming fans, the lights, the stage." A pause. "And somehow, after all of that," she smiled, "you're just here." He walked toward her. "Where else would I be?" She laughed softly. Then he looked around the room, almost amused by the memory. Mee-Mee tilted her head. "What?" Joo-Won smiled to himself. "I was just thinking about New Year's Eve weekend." Mee-Mee smiled. "The one we just celebrated in the Maldives." He chuckled. "No." He looked over at her. "The one a year ago, the night before my concert." The memory immediately found her. "Oh." A smile spread across her face. "I remember." Joo-Won laughed. "I had to send you out of my hotel suite." Mee-Mee covered her face for a second. "You did." She laughed, "and I was whimpering." "I know," Joo-Won said. "I was trying to do the right thing." She looked at him with that familiar grin. "You were suffering." He laughed. "You look too good. I was fighting for my life." They both burst into laughter, then Joo-Won smiled. What a difference a year makes. He reached for her hand. She wasn't just the woman he loved, she was his wife. Mee-Mee squeezed his hand, and now, she smiled. You don't have to send me anywhere. Joo-Won smiled back. No, his eyes never left hers. I get to keep you. She hugged him tightly. I'm your very own Velcro wife. Joo-Won laughed, and I wouldn't change that for anything, and then kissed her. Some seasons of love are spent wondering if you'll ever get your chance. This season was simply about enjoying the answer. This has been Christmas in Old Towne Love Stories. If you found yourself replaying the music from this season, Joo-Won and Friends. Part 1 and Part 2 are both available now on Apple Music, Spotify, Instagram, Amazon, and many other streaming platforms. And coming soon, Part 3, featuring Mee-Mee's song, Kairos-Five's concert performances, and even more music from this episode. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us a comment. We'd love to know, what was your favorite part of this episode? Who's your favorite couple so far? And why do you think Bond, the Maine Coon kitty, keeps hissing? Until next time, have a merry every little thing.
I kept my hands polite, kept my mouth in line, kept that hunger folded up for a very long time. I walked that edge for years, with a steady face. Now I wear your name, and I got no room to take. No more stopping short, no more holding back. You gave me the green light, and I'm right where you at. Your smile says go on, and your touch says stay. I've been saved for this, now I got my way. Now that we're married, I can love you free, 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 free. Now that we're married, you can get all of me. Yeah, kiss me like you mean it, pull me close and deep. Now that we're married, my hands can finally speak. Kissed you on the forehead, then I kissed you slow. Then I lost my caution at the edge of your coat. Cuddling someone skin to skin, no fear. We can make that magic that I wanted all these years. You call it permission, I call it home, home. All that waiting paid off, now we're never alone. No more stopping short, no more holding back. You gave me the green light, and I'm right where you at. Your eyes said go on, your touch said stay. I've been saved for this, now I got my way. Now that we're married, I can love you free, 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 free. Now that we're married, you can get all of me. Kiss me like you mean it, pull me close and deep. Now that we're married, my hands can finally speak. I was trained to be careful, I was trained to wait, but your ring on my finger turned that lock to a gate. Now I don't have to tiptoe, now I don't have to pretend. What I kept on the inside, I can bring it to your bed.